7 for the dwarf lords in their stone halls, and 9 for mortal men doomed to die for the Dark Lord on his darkest day. The throne in Mordor, where the One Ring to rule them all lurks in the shadows. One ring to locate them, only one ring to bring them all, and bind them in the darkness. In Mordor, where the shadows are, Liam Gavon's Houston friends can be found here, with yet another epic character arc for. In my opinion, this is one of the best days you've had in a long time. One of history's most heinous villains, and I have been looking forward to it a lot. Creating this video, please enjoy it. Under a variety of names, including the nameless enemy of the Lord of Gifts and the Most High. Sauron, infamously known as the Lord of the Rings, was originally a Maya who served Lay the Smith, who was of the Valar. His original name was Myra, meaning the admirable he wore. This name during his time serving under ruler, learning much about the craft of forging. This craft would become useful in the construction of the Barad-dûr, and the One Ring. Sauron was the most powerful of the mystics, even more powerful than Alarion and Cuomo, who would one day be known as Gandalf and Saruman. In his early days, Sauron was good at heart and uncorrupted, as Iluvatar had created him. However, Sauron was soon tainted by the original Dark Lord Melkor before the war. In the first age after his corruption, Sauron remained falsely loyal to the Valar and spied on the divine beings for his Dark Master, until a tomb without integrant was built and Sauron openly declared himself a servant of Melkor. Nothing in the world is evil, according to the quote. Even if the beginning was sour, the end was not. Quote. Following his betrayal, the Noldor was dubbed. He was known as Sauron, which means the Abhorred One. He is known as lieutenant, serving as Costa Yon of Angband during Melkor's reign in a tomb in Sauron, escaping the first destruction of that wicked place during the War of the Powers, when the Valar would seize Melkor for the first time. His infamy grew as the First Age began because Sauron directed the war against Fëanor Delves during the War of the Powers. It's definitely interesting to see how powerful Sauron was at this time and how he lost this power throughout the ages. In my opinion, Sauron first takes the reins as a true villain in his own right during the tale of Beren and Luthien. At this time Melkor was the arch-nemesis of the Valar, Maya and the Elves, but I believe Sauron first takes the reins as a true villain in his own right during the tale of Beren and Luthien. The line of leaders in the Bae house were Witchwood, the race of men, and so Sauron tortured Gorlim, one of Barahir's men, for the location of his leader. After Gorlim revealed Barahir, the band of men were killed, creating the first great tensions between men and Sauron. Beren, the son of Barahir who still lived, sought vengeance and eventually came to the forest of Doriath, where he met Luthien and embarked on the quest for the Silmaril. During this quest, Beren and his companions were captured by Sauron before they could reach Melkor's fortress of Aband. In order to steal one of Fëanor's Silmarils, they were held on Sauron's island of werewolves, and Finrod, king of the Noldurian elves, defended Beren to the last with songs and martial skills before Luthien and the hound named Huan came and tore Sauron apart. Sauron remained hidden throughout the first stage in the War of Wrath in order to avoid punishment from his master for such a defeat at the hands of Luthien. Near the end of the first stage, when Nal'Quria was finally beaten and cast into the void, Sauron, who is now without a master, surrendered to the host of the West but refused to face judgment in Valinor, so he fled to Mordor, where he built the Tower of Barad-dûr to stand against the free peoples in ages to come. Sauron now is the only Dark Lord, established his new realm during the early parts of the Second Age. Like his master Melkor, Sauron desired to rule Middle-earth or destroy it if he couldn't control it, and first of all, Sauron corrupted the men of Arad, and ruined with delusions of power and wealth. Then he built armies of orcs and trolls. In the Second Age, Sauron morphed into a fair elven lord of the Vanir, known as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. He came to a region and befriended the Elder Elves who lived there, including their leader Celebrimbor, and bore other elders such as Galadriel, Elrond and Gil-galad. Did not trust the Anatar, but they did not take open action against him. However, the elves who did trust him were seduced by his teachings, and so they learned the art of ring crafting. With this knowledge, Celebrimbor and Bor crafted the 3 elven rings, untouched by Sauron's malice, and after the men, dwarves, and elves had their rings, Sauron crafted his ruling ring in Mount Doom, a volcano in Mordor, to rule the minds of the wearers of these rings. It was Sauron's plan that if he could get every leader of every race to wear one of his rings, he would be able to dominate their minds and thus control all peoples of Middle-earth. But this plan backfired because the elves sensed Anatar's treachery, and immediately removed their rings. became greedy for wealth, but nothing more. Their inherent strength and power had saved them from Sauron. But the 9 men were corrupted, and they became the Nazgul and greatest of the Dark Lord's servants indeed. Most men of Middle-earth had become servants of Sauron, and to the men of the West who had created Gondor, and are no longer dwelt in Numenor, because Sauron couldn't taint the elves because Sauron couldn't taunt. He declared war on the elves, and nearly conquered all of Middle-earth, killing the same elves he had duped years before, until the men of the West intervened that Sauron was driven back. Under the King Tar, minister of Numenor, the men of that fair island came unto Middle-earth and pushed Sauron back to Mordor. This allowed the Dark Lord to grow in power over many centuries, and towards the later years in the Second Age Malcor served once again. The Numenorans were offended, so the great men of that island went back to Mordor without any conflicts and easily imprisoned the Dark Lord, as their strength of arms was far superior to that of Sauron's forces. However, Sauron is a master deceiver and manipulator, so he used his imprisonment to his advantage and corrupted the kingdom of Numenor from within. The same King Arthur Azam eventually came to trust Sauron, who had assumed another fair guise as his protector. So Sauron spread lies to the people of Numenor, telling them that his old master Melkor had the power to save men from that which they most feared, death. Even though these men had longer lifespans than any normal human, they still feared their mortality, so they succumbed to Sauron's lies and built a temple to the original Dark Lord. Human sacrifices were used to worship him. Eventually, the men of Sour Grapes were unconvinced. Numenor to sail against the Valar, and then Numenor to sail against the Valar, and then Numenor to sail against our all-powerful master intervened, drowning Numenor, and our followers Pharazons were destroyed. And, regrettably, this was not the end of the men of the West, also known as Sauron, Aslan and his devoted sons who had not betrayed him. Bravery were granted safe passage. Middle-earth, where they constructed Arnor and Gondor is one of the 2 human kingdoms, would be the most effective against Sauron in later in life. Although Sauron's body was destroyed in the downfall of Numenor, his spirit was strong enough to bring the One Ring back to Mordor, allowing him to revitalize his physical body in the final years of the kingship. Sauron discovered that Halin existed in the Second Age. Dial was still alive, and he despised him. The Dark has the most Numenorians of any Numenorian. Lord fought too soon in the hopes of winning. Suffocate Gondor and Arnor, the High King. After 12 years of planning and fighting, Gil-galad of the Elves and High King Lundia defeated Sauron in the War of the Last Alliance when Isildur cut the One Ring from the Dark Lord's hand. Thus the Third Age came to be, and Sauron's events in this time are pretty well known, so I will quickly summarize them. It is speculated to portray him as a flaming high-topped Barad-dûr, but I don't think that's what Tolkien had in mind. I believe Sauron took a physical form towards the end of the Third Age, but he remained within Barad-dûr using the Ithel stone to spy from the lens of Mordor, because the One Ring remained carried by Isildur lost in the end of 1,000 years. Sauron began to re-establish himself. He built the strongholds of Dû Guldur and Mirkwood, and he bade his followers to do the same. Around this time, the Valar sent wizards into Middle-earth to keep watch against Sauron and advise the free peoples, and Nazgul began to reveal themselves in the year 1300, and suspicions began to arise concerning Sauron's returned in 2063 of the Third Age. Gandalf investigated Dol Guldur for any sign of me. Discovered far too soon in his plan, Sauron most likely went to the Far East until 2460, when he returned to Dol Guldur, effectively ending the Watchful Peace. After his return to Dol Guldur, Sauron continued his preparations for the final war against the Free Peoples. Gandalf infiltrated Dol Guldur again in 2850 and discovered that Sauron had indeed returned, but the White Council waited until 2941 before doing anything about him, by which time Sauron had put up a weak fight against them and was ready to return to Mordor and enact his final war. I believe Sauron spent the majority of this age until Guldur waiting for Arnor's downfall and the weakening of the Free People so that he would have almost no resistance in his domination. During this time, he was also most likely thinking about the One Ring and where it could possibly be, so Sauron rebuilt his armies in Barad-dûr while enslaving the men of the South and East. During the War of the Ring, Sauron used the symbol of the Lulucite to instill fear in the people of Middle-earth. From 3018 to 3019 of the Third Age, Sauron had the advantage in arms and tactics over the Free Peoples and could have won the war with those, but his greatest weakness led to his final defeat, He underestimated the free peoples of Middle-earth, and he was far too confident in his own abilities and decisions that Aragorn, the future king of Arnor and Gondor, descended from armies against all of Sauron's forces at the Battle of the Black Gate. The hobbits Frodo and Sam snuck into Mount Doom and destroyed the One Ring with the help of a Golem, or Smeagol as he was once known. This defeated the second and final Dark Lord of Tolkien's legendarium, and Sauron's spirit was forever weaker. After the destruction of Sauron, a new age of peace was brought into Middle-earth, and the free peoples would never face such an enemy again.